Hi, so in this part of the lesson we're going to be looking at what reliability is at the start. So if you can all turn please to page 61 in your booklet, have a pen at the ready and a highlighter as well because you will be adding a few notes. Okay, so you should already know what reliability is. We mention it in most lessons with most piece of research that you've already looked at. So let's just have a recap. So it's the extent to which a test produces a consistent finding every time it's done. So reliability is about consistency. You will get the same results again and again and again. So if we carried out the ASH research with people who don't know about the ASH study, we would get similar findings. Okay. For example, there I've put a tape measure is very reliable, so I could measure someone in the class 100 times and I should get the same answer. So in your research methods glossary, you can either pause the video now or do this at the end of the video, add the definition from the booklet to your glossary. Okay, we are going to add something else now to the bottom of page 61. Okay, so if you can add the question which is on the left hand side of the screen, and if you can add this near the bottom underneath the table where it says there's two types of reliability there's some space there on page 61. So if you could write the question out, what is the difference between reliability and validity? We do get quite a lot of questions which ask about differences. Now you already know what validity is and we're going to look at it in more detail in a bit. Okay, now obviously with the what is the difference question, the keyword that we're always looking for is whereas. So hopefully you remember that, you're aware of that, and you will be putting that in your answers. But I have put an answer here for you. Okay, so if you can be putting this answer down in the booklet, and then it's always there for you. So we've got the answer there. Reliability refers to consistency, i.e. the ability to get the same results. If a study is repeated using the same method, design and measurements, and the same results are obtained, the results are said to be reliable. Whereas, and I've underlined the keyword there for you, validity concerns accuracy. So in common sense language, has it measured what you intended to measure? But let's go back to the answer now. So it's the degree to which something measures what it intends to. So validity refers to how accurately a study investigates what it claims to, and also whether the findings are accurate beyond the laboratory, research settings, or in other cultures and time periods. I'll just put in brackets there, can it be generalised as well? So those last few points at the end there on validity we will look at in more detail in the validity part of this presentation. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, if we look in your booklet there, something else that you could be asked in the exam is not just what is reliability, but what is the purpose of it? Why do we have reliability? Now, you know me, I'm a super geek. I love research methods because research methods is at the core of all psychological research. And one of the cores of that is reliability. It's a vital part of scientific research. Okay, so if we can put this, what I'm going to read out now, in the space under the heading, why is it important for researchers to have reliable data? So it's highly important as part of psychological research because if you remember our psychological research, we're trying to test out our aims and hypotheses. And if we can say, yeah, we've supported those, and the results are due to the study and not any possible extraneous variables. So if the study is carried out again and again and again, and it's not been affected by extraneous variables, that is a vital part of psychological research. So that is why reliability is so important. So if we can make sure we add that to the booklet, please. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so if we look at the different types of reliability, you do need to know what these are for the exam. You could be asked for example, and you can add this to your booklet. You could put it in the little gap in the box under where it says internal reliability. What is meant by internal reliability? That could be a 2-mark question. So let's have a look at what it is. So if we look in the booklet now, but in common sense language, it's basically, are your results consistent within your research, whether that be an experiment or a questionnaire? Are the results consistent within it? So let's have a look at the booklet there. So the measures used will show consistent results. So, for example, an aggression questionnaire should be constantly measuring aggression throughout the questions asked. So if you're doing an experiment on conformity to a minority, your methods that you use should be constantly measuring that, okay, nothing else. So that is what internal reliability is. Okay, in the exam, again, you could be asked, why is it important? And you could use what we've spoken about before. So we really need it to make sure that we are consistent within our results and when we've tested our aims and hypothesis. Okay. External reliability, again, you could be asked what is meant by external reliability. If you want to add that to your booklet now, you can pause the video. You could also be asked, for example, there could be a scenario and it could say, how is this showing external reliability? Okay, so if we just look in the booklet now, so this concerns getting the same results over time, again and again and again. So if we, for example, if we look at the booklet there, we carry out a test on aggression and how we've observed aggressiveness in a playground with children, for example, we should get that same rate of aggression if we watch them again when they're tested on a different occasion. Okay, so if we turn over now to page 62. What we're going to be looking at now is how do we know that our research is reliable, whether it's an experiment, whether it's a closed questionnaire. And in the exam, you could be asked how a researcher could test that their research is reliable. How could they assess that it's reliable? Okay, the first one that we're going to be looking at is test-retest methods. So basically, this is when the researcher would carry out the same experiment, the same questionnaire at a different point and just retesting it if they get the same results, etc. We should be able to say that it is reliable, but let's have a look at the booklet there. Okay, so it tests reliability by giving the same test to the same participants on 2 different occasions. And we are looking at statistics here as well. So whatever they scored on the first test or what variable they were measured on, they should get the same results on the second occasion there. Also, as part of a test-retest method, to know that we've got that reliability, we would plot those 2 different scores on a scatter graph because we need to show that there is a strong correlation. In the booklet there, you can assess them using the Spearman's Rose test. Now, we haven't looked at that yet, but we will be looking at that in September, and you need to know what the purpose of that is. So don't worry too much about that yet, but it is just a statistical test looking at correlation. Okay, so we then decide how strongly are the results correlated, and in psychology we're trying to aim for a plus 0.8 correlation. What that means in common sense language is we need at least an 80% correlation to say that it is significant. Okay, so therefore we can assess reliability not just with a basic correlation, but with really good statistical significance. Okay. The next way of observing reliability, and we have mentioned this briefly before, is inter-observer reliability, also known as inter-rater reliability. So what this involves is where you would have not just one researcher carrying out the experiment or the questionnaire, whatever method you're choosing to use. If it's appropriate for reliable data, you would have 2, 3, maybe more carrying out the research. So if we look at the booklet now, okay, so it's generally used for observations and interviews as well. And the reason this is used quite a lot in observations is because when we're observing human behaviour, we all interpret behaviours in different ways to one another. And what we need to do is to ensure that what one researcher and other researchers say, that they correlate again. Okay, so if we just look at the booklet there, so we achieve it by, firstly, we have 2 or more researchers beforehand. They'll discuss the criteria for the observation research. So they'll come up with an observation schedule. If you remember, we have had a look at those before. And what they will then do is carry out the observation independently. So they won't be together, they may be in a different room, they may be looking at video recordings, and what they will then do is bring the data and compare it with one another. And again, if there's a strong correlation, we can say that those observations are reliable. If not, one of the problems would be that they've not operationalised fully the behaviour that they were observing, or the behaviour or the attitudes that they were interviewing about. So they may have to go back and redo the observation schedule. Okay. And the last point that we need to look at is, well, how do we improve reliability? So we've looked at what it is, we've looked at why it's important, we've looked at the different types of reliability, and we've looked at how to assess reliability. Okay, so the last bit there. Okay, in the exam, you could be given a scenario and you're going to be looking at an exam question like this as part of your homework. Is how could the research improve reliability? Okay, so the first point there, take more than one measurement from each participant. If we look at the booklet there, we would try and get average scores. So if we say looking at visual stimulus, looking at perception, or you might want to do an IQ test, we could carry that out a few times. The main one here for improving reliability, we mentioned it just briefly, is using clearly operationalised variables. When we're measuring natural human behaviour, it can be quite difficult. Say we're doing an observation and we're measuring, like we've mentioned briefly, aggression. We've really got to operationalise those variables. The next one is pilot studies. So these are really useful. Going back to the last point, have you operationalised your variables correctly? Are there any methods that you need to change? Can participants use the apparatus successfully? Do they understand the questions being asked? And the last point there is when we're looking at inter-rater reliability, we've got to record our observations in a standardised way. So that is why before you would have a meeting to agree on what you are observing, having an observation schedule, what you're noting down from an interview. And what that does is that improves inter-rater reliability. Okay, so that is it on reliability. What you're going to be asked to do is create some revision notes on this. You can do record cards, you can do notes on your phone, whatever you normally use. I would like to see these though. You can take pictures of them, just submit it to assignments, but just make sure that you are covering all of these areas, because you could be asked a specific question on any of these points. Okay. I've also put in the instructions the exam questions that I would like you to answer. You can answer those, and I would like you to answer those in your research methods question paper booklet, but if you prefer to just do it on file paper or type them up first and then submit it to Teams, and then once you know your answers are correct, you can copy that into your exam question booklet. Okay. Okay, as well, please don't forget about the Seneca quiz. The beauty of Seneca Online is it gives you some revision and then it asks you questions. The majority of you are doing these, but it is a requirement for while we're not in college that you are doing these, because it's a really good way of refreshing your knowledge, and I can see where you're up to, and also you can see what you need to go over as well. Also as well, it's really important that you can complete it by the deadline, otherwise I will have to go in and allow you to access it again. If it is a problem for whatever reason, I know it is challenging times and we're all following different timetables now and we've all got personal lives and things happen, just let me know if possible and then I can extend that for you. But anything like that, just let me know. If you're struggling with questions, you don't know how to answer them, please just drop me an email. Okay, it is no problem at all. Okay, let's move on to the last bit now, which is validity. Okay, so if we can turn to page 63 in your booklet, and we're just going to have a look at what is meant by validity. We've mentioned it before, and validity is basically, are you accurately measuring what you set out to measure? So what I would like you to do from page 63, if you can add the definition to the glossary. Okay, because in the exam you could be asked what is meant by validity, and you'll be surprised how many times, not from our college, but other students don't answer this question. They just don't know how to define it, or they get it mixed up with reliability. So just remember, it's just, are your results accurate? Have you measured your variables accurately? Okay, so it's about measuring, and that's why I put a picture of a tape measure there. Sorry, you know I'm sad. Are you accurately measuring what you set out to measure? And you might think, well, how can you not do that? But I will give you examples of where people can go out and they think they're measuring about, I don't know, let's stick to the aggression theme, aggression in video games. But they might not be looking at aggression in video games, they might be looking at interaction. And again, what their perception is of aggression might not be the same as the people playing the video games. So we've got to be really careful. We're measuring those variables accurately. We're measuring our aim and a hypothesis accurately. I think you might be getting the idea that the key word is accurate and accuracy here. Okay, so keep that in mind. But let's have a look at this in the booklet. Okay, so validity concerns accuracy, the degree to which something measures what it intends to. So therefore, validity refers to how accurately a study investigates what it claims to, and also whether the findings are accurate beyond laboratory settings, so in other cultures or time periods. So can we generalize these findings as well? Okay, so make sure you add that to your glossary. You might want to pause me now. Okay, the next bit that we are going to look at are the different types of validity. Again, you've heard about these, we've used them in class. You could be asked what they mean, and you could also be given an example and asked what type of validity are they showing. And in the next bit, we're going to be looking at how to improve these types of validity. Also, keep your glossary handy. I want you to be adding these definitions to your glossary, because some students get mixed up with external validity, and temporal validity, so we're going to take our time going through these. So let's have a look in your booklet now. So internal validity is basically what it says on the tin, really. It's, are your variables, your tasks, are you measuring what you intended to measure within your research? Okay, the way that we get internal validity, we should be checking for this as a good psychologist anyway, is try to control all extraneous variables before conducting the research. Some things happen which we can't control, but we should always aim to try to control those extraneous variables. Okay. Another type of validity, and there's 3 types which come under this, is external validity. So if we look in the booklet there, can the findings be generalised beyond the setting of the study? Now there's 3 branches, like I say, which come under this. The first one we've heard of, we mention it quite a lot in classes, ecological validity. So just be careful with this. So external validity is, can we generalise the results beyond the research setting? It is different to ecological validity. Okay, ecological validity comes under a type of external validity. Sorry to confuse you further, but ecological validity refers to, does the setting reflect real life? So let's have a look in your booklet there. So is it reflective of a real life setting? So if you remember, we can criticise Ash because his settings is not real life. Okay, the next one is population validity. Now, the majority of psychological research doesn't actually have population validity. It is difficult to apply to other populations, to the ones that have been studied. But let's have a look at what it is. So, can we apply our findings? Sorry, I had to pause there. I'll just go back to what we was talking about. So population validity there. So can we generalise our findings to the whole sample population? So if you're interested in conformity, if we look at the example in the booklet there, but used an all-male sample, majority of studies that we've looked at have done that. Not all, but the majority. That wouldn't reflect how females conform. Okay, we've mentioned about Milgram's study. The original research was carried out on male undergraduates as well as businessmen. It was carried out just on males. Okay, the next one is temporal validity. Now, a lot of psychological research, the big major studies that we look at, like Zimbardo, Milgram, Mary Ainsworth's research, we could argue that they don't have temporal validity now because times change. So if we think about when we look at research into developmental psychology, the attachment research by John Bowlby, that lacks temporal validity because dads didn't take care of the children like they do now when he carried out his original research on attachment. Okay, so let's move on. If we can turn to page 64, please. Okay, now in the exam, you could be asked how to assess a validity. They could just ask you that, or they could ask you what these 3 types of assessing validity are, and they could also give you a scenario and ask how would the researcher or other researchers assess validity there. Okay, so the first way that we can assess validity in research is face validity. And again, it's basically what it says on the tin. It's, can we look at that research? Okay, so looking at face validity there, sorry, I had to pause again. So it's basically, is it measuring, when you look at it, what it is intending to measure? Okay, so for example, there in your booklet, e.g. a questionnaire on happiness that has questions about what makes you happy, it looks like a happiness questionnaire. If it had questions on about sadness, what makes you sad, it's not going to have face validity. Don't try to overthink this. That is what face validity is. The next one is concurrent validity, and we have talked about this before. So concurrent validity is, do we see the same results within a test, an established test? Okay, so we have a variety of different tests for personality. For example, Eysenck's test of personality, Myers-Briggs, you've probably done that one in values for living. And we would generally there, if we look in the booklet there, is that if we can compare our test with an older test, and it's similar, we have validity there. So for example, a researcher gives the same participant a new personality questionnaire and at the same time a well-known valid personality questionnaire. The scores of both questionnaires would need to correlate to say that we've got that concurrent validity. Okay, the next one is predictive validity. Now, unfortunately, in the current climate, this is what a lot of teachers are having to do for our year 13, is that we predict results based on previous results. Okay, and it also, as part of that, we're predicting future performance. So with any statistics, what we find out, research that we do, we can predict what's going to happen in the future. Now again, those are statistics, not always true, but that is one way of assessing validity. Can we predict our outcomes based on past performance? So for example, there in the booklets, if a SATs test given at age 7 predicts the final grades achieved at GCSE, it would suggest the original test did actually measure academic ability and therefore establishes internal validity. So for example, you get a predicted minimum target grade based on your GCSE results, but I generally predict if you work hard, you can get higher than that. But if we just took it at face value, what your GCSE results would predict for your A level, that would be an example of predictive validity. Okay, let's have a look at the last point now. So, ways of improving validity. Again, you could be asked just how to do this in the exam, or you could be given a scenario which asks you how would the researcher improve that validity. Okay, so with regards to internal validity, we need to look at the problems with confounding variables, demand characteristics and investigator effects, which do happen. Okay, so trying to improve validity, it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to try and improve it. The first way is we've got to choose the correct and the appropriate experimental design. So is it independent groups? Should it be matched pairs? It just depends on the research. Can we control those extraneous variables? So sometimes it can be quite tricky. So when I'm doing my videos, my lovely neighbours, as they're doing now, might start to decide to mow their lawn. I can't control that, but hopefully you can still hear me above that as well. What we've discussed before, the single blind technique, where the participants don't know whether they're in condition A or condition B, and then we've got the double blind technique where neither the researcher nor the participant know which condition they're in, and it usually means another researcher is carrying out that research to improve that validity. Okay, with regards to external validity, okay, sorry, typo there, it should be sampling. We've got to select a sampling method that is, we've got a representative sample. So if you just say do an opportunity sample, it's just who's available there, it might not be representative. So for example, in the exam, they might give a scenario and say they've used opportunity sampling. How could you improve the external validity of that? So you may have a specific type of sampling that you would use instead, such as stratified sampling. That would improve external validity. And the last point, the realism, linking to ecological validity there. So we've got to try and conduct our research, if appropriate, in the most realistic setting. Okay, we've got to try and make it as true to life as possible, and that could be through an actual experiment or a field experiment, mainly a field experiment if you still want those controls there. Okay, so activity 7, what I'd like you to do, we've just gone through validity. Can you make some revision notes and cards? Use the format before if you wish to use that. Can you complete the exam questions? Again, you can handwrite the answers or type them up, submit it to Teams, or if you want to go for it and write it in your answer booklet, take pictures of that, you're very welcome to do so, or you might want to wait until after half term when I will be giving you the answers and the mark schemes. You might want to add the correct answers in there because some of these questions are a bit tricky. Okay, but we've got to challenge ourselves, have a go, use your booklet to help you answer them as well. And remember, if you are struggling a bit, it's not cheating, but you might just want to have a look at mark schemes. Remember, mark schemes, they don't give you model answers. They will just give you guidance on how to answer them. But at the moment, I always do that. Set you the challenge, have a go yourself, and then we'll have a look at them after half term. Okay. And the last bit, again, please don't forget to complete the Seneca quiz on validity. It is a really useful tool. Like I said before, the majority of you are using this, but a few of you still need to complete the quizzes. The beauty of Seneca, rather than just me giving you a basic quiz, is that it does some revision with you first of all, and then it will assess you. And if you're struggling with it, it will give you some more hints and tips, and it adapts to your learning as well. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, still email me. And I hope you have a lovely half term and a well-deserved rest. You are all doing fantastically well, and stay safe.